and really the single most important thing I've set myself to do in this 2 months and in these first months at NYU is to listen to the issues that are uppermost in everyone's mind, whether it be the Board of Trustees, whether it be the faculty, whether it be staff, or very much whether it be students. And so I'm hoping today that we'll be able to explore, and you'll have a chance for me to hear what issues you see as important for NYU in 2016 and things that I should know about in these early weeks. Ellen has just made introduced the topic of the global network. Obviously, this is something that has been a very significant part of NYU for quite some time. I do point out to everyone, this isn't an invention of the last 10 years or so. It was in 1958 that NYU Madrid was opened, and really it's been a steady development with other sites opening in the subsequent 50-odd years. For me, looking at NYU from the outside, and obviously it's only 2 months that I've been on the inside, from the outside, from Oxford, across the Atlantic, from Yale, up I-95, the GNU has been quite a remarkable achievement. And universities around the world recognize that NYU has been a leader in its international engagement, in its outreach, the establishment of campuses and study away sites. Many of you know that other universities have tried to follow, have set up separate and different types of operations around the world. But for me, it's a very significant development. Does it have issues and challenges? Of course it does. The world is a messy place. But NYU has very clearly staked a position that it needs to be in the world. Just as NYU is in and of the city, it is also in and of the world. And by being in these locations, by offering students the opportunity to study in many different cultures around the world, offering faculty the opportunity to develop research and collaborate in particular regional as well as more fundamental issues around the world, is a very significant thing. So one of the things this afternoon I'd like to hear from you and from the panel in particular, but any of you, is what have your experiences been? How many of you have studied abroad? Did you find it a rewarding experience? Were the issues that you encountered, did they overwhelm the positives, or were the positives in different forms the takeaway from your experience? Obviously, there is always a concern, and there have been very real concerns expressed about the global network taking away attention from New York. And I suppose a corollary is, are there clear signs that has been the case? But most importantly, I'd like to hear from you what your experience is of the GNU, particularly those who've participated and studied abroad, what those experiences have been.
Stephen, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'd like to start off also thanking President Hamilton for being here and taking the time to chat with us, and also, okay, great. And also, as a senator, hearing you speak in the University Senate about the issue that's on the mind of a lot of students here, affordability, is very refreshing. And but to start over talking about the global network, I've had the opportunity to study in Abu Dhabi for 2 semesters. I actually returned a month and a half ago. For me, it's been a wonderful experience. I am an international student myself, and Abu Dhabi obviously is the epitome of internationalism, globalism, with all the international students and the opportunities you have to go global. And it also helped me realize that as international as NYU New York is, and as global a city as New York is, we still haven't quite reached the level that Abu Dhabi has reached. And also, I'm hoping to see in the future that we can make global more than just study abroad for students in New York. Because there are so many opportunities that I've seen in Abu Dhabi that I think we can bring to New York and bring to students in New York. So it's not just thinking about going away, but also incorporating global as this is a global center in our experience while we're in New York.
What might that look like?
So I think because in Abu Dhabi has been designed to focus on global. You are in the middle of a very interesting region. The students come from everywhere. So you are, from day one, you realize that the opportunities are beyond where you live and where you go. So I would hope to see more sort of shorter-term projects or more interaction between sites than is the case currently. I used to be involved in club life, global club life in TEDx, and I've realized myself that it can be very hard to navigate the structures to set up clubs in other sites and have interaction between sites. And I was hoping that we have this great infrastructure, but it would be amazing if students have more access to the opportunities that it gives us.
Yeah. Stephen, I think you make very, very important points. That the global network will be working at its best when there is a flow among the sites, when that flow of courses students traveling from one site to the other and experiencing the different cultures represented by the sites. It will be when the flow of faculty is at its best. And it will very definitely be when the flow of ideas, which is your suggestion, that ideas in one site will influence and inform and improve other sites. You touch upon clubs. I was just in Abu Dhabi, literally last weekend for the final candidate weekend when candidates are brought in. And one of the students I met with, who was a current student at Abu Dhabi, talked about the establishment of clubs that are working literally among the 3 major sites. This was a women's outreach club that connected with girls in high school and in elementary school in the region. And it was a program that linked Abu Dhabi, Shanghai, and New York, all working together, almost as one club. Now, it's only one example, and you're pointing, we need more of those, and I'm hopeful that in the coming months and years we will see more.
Shara, you also have some experiences.
Yeah. So I study abroad in London and in Abu Dhabi, and then we also have smaller, shorter-term immersions through Stern, where I got to study abroad in Peru for a week through a service trip, and then also through a program we call the International Studies Program, where I got to go to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And Stephen covered, more on global student life, but one of the main feedback that we get, especially when Stern students come back from abroad, is that even though they have a great cultural immersion and they get a global education, there's sort of, a main difference between the sites when it comes to academic rigor. So certain sites might be a little bit more academically challenging than the others. So I was wondering if there's anything that we can do to improve that and have a more stabilized sort of curriculum based in the global sites.
One of the developments that's taken place over the last couple of years has been a much closer involvement of faculty, particularly faculty here in New York, and faculty committees that then have responsibility for the academic programs in individual sites. And so that's always been the case to some extent, but it's been now over the last couple of years become much more engaged, more faculty, but also importantly from more academic departments and schools here in New York, which is good because it then allows the kind of oversight, the rigor, the assessment of every course that's being offered, the assessment of every teacher who is teaching those courses. And so I think that is a good development. I do think the global network is a project in progress. It is a work in progress. And we should always be looking for mechanisms to improve what we do in each of the sites. And there is nothing more important than improving the academic quality and the academic rigor of the offerings in the sites, and indeed in New York. Now, no university should ever be content with where it is in any of its activities. We should always be looking to improve.
And any of the others of you who didn't travel abroad want to say why you didn't, or why you might be thinking of it, or what you've heard about the issues?
Hi, everyone. I just want to also say thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to speak on this panel with you. A big thing that we've been talking about in the SSC, the Student Senators Council, for the past 2 years is academic consistency across the entire GNU, and I know that's something that Shire began to touch on. So one thing I know in CAS, students who were only allowed to take 16 credits outside of our school. So students who study abroad and go to Shanghai or Abu Dhabi, some of those courses don't count towards their degree, and they take those courses and they can actually complete their degree with CAS. And a lot of our majors also require you to take classes outside of the school. And I think maybe a problem with that the reason we have this problem is that the core competencies that you're supposed to gain from some of these classes aren't clear and recognized in other schools. So maybe in CIS we don't have a clear understanding of when you go to Shanghai and take a certain course, what you're actually gaining from that course, and should it count as a liberal arts course? And that's, I think, a conversation that we should start having as a university, just to encourage more students to go abroad and not feel that if they're going abroad they're losing something about their degree.
Let me say, Amanda, I agree. It is a conversation we should be having around the university. Inevitably, individual departments and individual degree programs inevitably have some constraints. Some are accredited by outside bodies and have to follow certain curricular pathways that may have more or less flexibility in the addition of courses. But the point you make is very well taken, and I think it's a critical one, again, for further development and evolution of the GNU.
So Eric, I wondered how you thought about this as a graduate student. I know as a former dean of Wagner that Wagner does offer some short-term courses, but how do you think about this second year?
Yes, we do offer a few courses at Wagner that are abroad. The one that's most pertinent to my track is in Switzerland. It's the health comparative policy. Now, while I did not attend NYU as an undergrad, I did spend a year abroad at my college. It was very difficult being a pre-med student, finding time to go abroad and study. And I know you mentioned the accreditations and finding equivalent coursework. I wonder whether that's also a conversation to be had with science students and pre-med students here at NYU. One of the only ways I could do that was to be an art major, and that's how I was able to swing going abroad and still having my science courses necessary.
So you were pre-med and an art major?
I was
double
indeed.
major? That's great. Where did you go to undergrad?
Wake Forest. In North Carolina. But I do love the broad options that we have, and I think what's great about Wagner is that we can also take courses that are not just Wagner specific. So there is quite an opportunity for us to swing Steinhardt courses or starting courses abroad if we so chose. And I think that that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Your point is well taken. That being said, one of the things that as I've got to know the GNU, and I'm only just beginning, there are many of the sites that I haven't visited yet, but it has surprised me very pleasantly the range of courses, obviously in Abu Dhabi and Shanghai, which really are able to offer many pre-med and science classes that would fit right in with a student's course requirements. Let me say, as a scientist, and I studied abroad myself, I studied in France and I studied in Canada as well as in the UK. And even science that you might think was a constant actually looks different when you look at it through different eyes, when you look at it through a different language. You know, chemistry in French and in a French approach is actually rather different than chemistry in the UK and through a UK approach, and you'd expect no greater separation between two countries than the UK and France. And you see it, and it's very valuable in sort of expanding one's mind, even in a subject that you might think was as fixed as a subject like chemistry or any of the sciences. And I'd also say, as you look beyond the 3 portal campuses, chemistry, physics, biology classes are taught in London. They're taught in other sites. So we're getting there. There will always be limits, and inevitably we don't want each of the sites to become as large as a portal campus, or heaven forbid, as large as New York. And so there will always be a desire for variability, but that option that students would have of at least more than 2 or 3 sites where they can take key required classes for their major is I think, important.
I agree.
So is there anybody in the wider room who would like to share an experience, a global experience, before we move on to talk about affordability, unless Nathan had something he wanted to say? Yes. Would you introduce yourself? Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Diana, and I'm a Wagner student as well.
Uh-huh.
I graduated from the Gallatin School, and while I was in the Gallatin School, I actually studied abroad in Accra.
Okay.
And one of the things I think that needs to be focused on, what's lacking, is that some of the sites, smaller sites, need more attention. And that being said, what Amanda said with both advising for courses and then also making students feel comfortable that they can go to that site. And I know that a lot of administration has actually not visited the Accra site, and I could say it was a wonderful experience. And also, the most successful students have actually come out of Accra. They actually do the most volunteer work, most internship work there. So I think that's just an area where we need more attention. And also, I work both at the medical center and I work at Wagner. They have so many different projects at both schools, but there is no continuity across. They have no idea what each other is doing. They don't talk to each other, and I think that's something else to keep in mind, that we should be keeping a link between the different schools and telling each other what we're doing and working together, because a lot of the projects are quite similar.
And let me respond. I'm delighted to hear that you had a good and rewarding experience in Accra. I agree with you. I think that one of the beauties of the GNU is its far-flung nature, represents South America, in Australia, in Africa, in the Middle East, obviously, as well as Europe. But that also creates those challenges of routine visits, and I agree with you. In a sense, your point about Wagner and the medical school, that's a New York issue rather than an Accra issue. It's getting the flow of communication among the different schools at NYU. While I talk about the GNU and the far-flung nature, NYU is pretty distributed around New York City, and that in itself, in as large and diverse an organization as we are, creates some challenges for inter-school communication, and you've put your finger on when it really hits the road, particularly in one of the global sites.
And can I ask you a quick favor regarding the Accra site?
Please.
Can you please update the website and the images, because those pictures are over a decade old.
All right.
And every time there's a presentation on Accra, it's really upsetting to see those photos.
I like pictures of me a decade old. I look younger and I had more hair, but Accra needs to be updated. Point taken.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, I've got one of those shirts.
So my name is James. I'm studying abroad from NYU Abu Dhabi here. It's now my 2nd semester. I want to share about my experience studying abroad for JTRM in Shanghai. Incredible experience, one of the most vibrant, fun cities that we've been to, really cool academic program, a lot of support. But what I think was lacking there is that there were students from New York, Shanghai, and Abu Dhabi all taking JTRM classes, but they're segregated. So there's New York only classes, which may be a result of school-specific classes or study abroad programs. There's Abu Dhabi classes, and then there were Shanghai, like 1 or 2 Shanghai classes offered. And I think that when we're in this kind of global study abroad environment, there's a lot to be said for the connections that we can make during these J-terms to have students integrated.
Absolutely. I'm assuming that the segregation was just through student choice, that they went through pathways but it was literally focused in.
Abu Dhabi has courses.
Yeah.
So it's
because you were taking those classes in Shanghai, and of course one of the fundamental tenets of the Shanghai campus is its interaction. And so for the regular students who are studying at NYU Shanghai, roommates, they are mixed. A Chinese roommate and an international student will, in every shared room, be put together. So there's a real fundamental tenet of the site to have interaction and interconnection. But it sounds like we haven't got there with the J-term because of the way in which these different courses are structured, and it's something we need to work on.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We're going to turn now to affordability, and we're going to give Nathan a chance because he didn't get to talk in the global conversation. So first, I'm going to ask President Hamilton to say a few words about it, and just a warning that we're going to come to you.
This is an issue that I said that my first few months at NYU, I was going to spend listening. However, having arrived here, there were 2 or 3 issues that I saw as really issues that couldn't wait for some nice time later in the semester. And one of them was affordability. It was the single most common issue that was raised for me as I met with students, as I met with faculty, as I met with staff. And so for me, I wanted to begin a process, to begin a focus on the issue of affordability, a focus that would be immediate and short term in one hand, but also longer term, medium to long term on the other. The immediate reaction was, as you saw in the announcement about 3 weeks ago, that we would tackle immediately the rate at which tuition had been rising. And next academic year, rather than a 3.5, 3.9% rise in tuition, we would limit it to 2.9%. That's the lowest rise in tuition in more than 20 years. But we would get at one of the even more pressing problems in New York City, which is, of course, the cost of room and food. And we are proposing to freeze that next year. So the cost next year will be the same as this year. The consequence of adding both of those together is that the overall cost of attendance will go up by 2%. Again, the smallest increase in the cost of attendance now in more than 20 years. It's a modest step. And as I said in my note to the community, I fully recognize it's a modest step. I wish we could do more. NYU does not have the size of endowment that places like Princeton and Yale have. We do have very aggressive financial aid and fundraising for increasing that financial aid. So this really does have to be a short-term, medium-term focus on increased fundraising. We're in the middle of a large $1 billion fundraising campaign called Momentum to increase financial aid. And that's now past $550 million, so we are moving apace. And then in the longer term, I think there are real issues of exploration of alternative ways of delivering education here at NYU. I've set up a steering committee to begin working with faculty, with departments, with schools. I've asked Ellen Shaw here, a former dean of Wagner, to take on the chairmanship of that steering group. And what are we going to be looking at? Are there pathways through NYU that might involve a shorter time period here, and thus tuition cost, 3.5 years, 3 years, for example? Are there ways in which we, as an institution, could more flexibly approach, for example, credits gained elsewhere at a community college, a lower cost institution, even AP classes in high school? Are there ways in which we could explore a more flexible approach to credits gained before coming to NYU? And then thirdly, and there will be many other ideas that will come forward as Ellen and her group begin their work. Thirdly, does technology have a role to play here? Online delivery of certain forms of education, is that an opportunity to both have quality but also lower cost? All three of those issues are profoundly academic questions. They have to do with curriculum and quality of degree. They have to do with student admission and quality and preparedness of students for their courses and their degrees. And thirdly, online, we need to be absolutely sure that the quality of the education is at least equal to and ideally enhanced by some form of online delivery. All those require deep academic analysis. This is what Ellen's committee will be pursuing, with representation from across the university.
So I just want to say also that we will be looking at the graduate school issues as well, school by school. They're different than the undergraduate issues, but be assured we won't ignore that issue. Nathan, how might you as a student inform our thinking, and what advice might you give us?
Well, as far as on the residential side, I work closely with the residential community and kind of liaising between them and administration on a variety of issues. And a really big one that has come up has been affordability when it comes to room and board, and what that looks like for students who coming here to pay the tuition costs, and then additionally, if they have to live here, that additional cost and what that looks like for them. A big part of my position is looking to see what we can change for students in housing. And as far as I have a committee on the Inter-Residence Hall Council where we literally talk about these questions, and a lot of them have brought up the issue of low-cost housing and why there are so few options for low-cost housing. And I know this is largely due for it's expensive to live in New York City. It's a very expensive city to own buildings, to pay for these services. But so low-cost housing issues have been a big focus for students, and especially when it comes to situations which would have a student switching of rooms. So if there's a roommate conflict or something going on, and students would have to switch buildings entirely, where the cost of certain buildings vary, even if slightly, it could be a big deal for a student as far as paying for it. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as the students who've asked me about it, right now there's no system for that. I could be wrong. If so, I would be happy to be corrected. But certainly that's an issue for students where they're considering living on a campus where it is expensive, and if there is something that comes up, having to take on an additional cost that they may not have already prepared for.
Yeah. Nathan, you're absolutely right, and offering students more options in terms of housing, and of course more lower cost options. You will also have noticed that in the announcement that we sent around 3 weeks ago, there was a freezing of fees, of course another important source of cost to our students. There was also an announcement that we were adding another 600 to 700 low-cost beds as an option to students next year. We need to do more, and I fully appreciate that. But that is an important start. It increases our number of low-cost beds by about 50%. So it is a significant change. You do put your finger on the principal challenge in that we are located, or at least the part that is here around Washington Square, we are located in one of the most expensive regions, in one of the most expensive cities on the face of the earth. And of course, that's what makes NYU special. We wouldn't want it any other way, because New York is such a great place to be, both to live, but also in the academic vibrancy that it creates with so many links of academic activities to life in the city, whether it be Wagner, whether it be CUSP, whether it be dentistry, nursing, medicine, the intersection with the city is intense in so many different directions. We wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but it does bring with it those kinds of issues. I think it's important to start to explore alternatives. And I raise this with trepidation because I know what everyone's going to say, but Brooklyn, does Brooklyn offer some alternatives in terms of student housing in the future that might be at a distance, of course, not if you're at Camden, but at a distance from Greenwich Village? I know what you're going to say. Brooklyn's probably as expensive as Manhattan now, since it's become such a cool place to be. But I think being imaginative, thinking about locations that have options for students will be key.
Other of you have advice for us or directions you would suggest we look? Sharon?
I think, and you guys mentioned this briefly, but focusing on school-specific, I guess, affordability issues is probably, I think, the core key in solving this problem, because, I'm sure the graduate schools have their problems as well, but even on the undergrad side, being on the heavier side in terms of being a STEM student, and as an international student, I think deep diving into the core school issues, working with the faculty and the dean's offices specifically. I'm sure you have updates on that development, but I think if you guys sort of do a deep dive on that, that's probably going to work.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Sharon. And I think that it comes back, it is a deeply academic issue. In individual schools, it must be the faculty, it must be the students, it must be the academic leadership working together to be sure that in any approach that we pursue, academic quality is not reduced. Let me give one example to your school specific, and there, about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, there was an editorial I guess it was an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal by the Dean of NYU's Medical School, describing the 3-year MD degree. MD degrees, of course, are normally 4 years, and NYU has a very successful, very popular 3-year MD degree, and of course, knocking an entire year's tuition off the cost of gaining that degree. And of course, you always have to remember, it's not only reducing the cost of tuition, it's also adding an additional year of salary in hopefully employment. And so it's a sort of double swing almost in terms of its impact on the individual student. And that's the kind of exploration that no one, schools have to come to that conclusion themselves, because it is an academic issue, but it's one that when affordability is also brought into the equation, certain schools, as the medical school as an example, see alternatives that they can offer students.
Amanda, do you have anything you want to say? Sure, yes. I think all of us as student leaders are very much aware of the fact that most of the income that we make as a university comes from tuition. So when we talk about affordability, while we want to find ways to reduce the cost of attendance, we also are very much aware that when we reduce the cost of attendance, we're also reducing the amount of money that we have in our budget as a university. And that comes into play for us because a lot of times we find ourselves in the midst of making recommendations to the university to either increase funding for this program or increase funding for that program. And it's sort of hard for us to do that while also understanding that we want to reduce the cost of attendance. So I think, one thing that we are talking about, we have an affordability task force on the Student Centers Council, and a big thing for us has been transparency, just because we want to, understand what's happening with our budget and understand what's happening when the university starts to prioritize. That way we can also make better recommendations and also make feasible recommendations, and so we're not, wasting everyone's time. And I know this is something that's important for now in CIS, because we I don't know if everyone knows, but Dean Starr has just announced to, in the 2016-17 academic year, to remove the student fees for students, which is it's $55 per student. So it's not a huge amount, but it's definitely a big step, and we were very happy about that. But what happened as a consequence is that 55 times 7,000 change students is a huge chunk of our budget. So right now we're trying to figure out what is our role as student leaders in assisting in the as we prioritize for our budget. So I guess my question is, where do you see our role as student leaders in this prioritizing, and also how would you assist? How would you advise us to go about making recommendations with keeping those things in mind?
I had a boss when I was at Yale. I had a boss who went on to become the first woman president at MIT, and she always used to say to me, "Andy, it's not about money; it's about choices." And in a sense, exactly what you just said, Amanda. We are in something of a zero-sum game in a non-profit institution like NYU. And when we decide to do one thing because it's important, it matters, and we prioritize it, then it means we don't have funds to do something else, so we have to reduce. And that has to be kept in mind whenever we come forward with new ideas and new initiatives. You raised the question of student input, and I would hope that the mechanisms by which the Student Senators Council comes forward with its sets of priorities, I would hope that the frequency of the meetings that I have, the presence of student representatives on the University Senate, all of those things are mechanisms whereby priorities of the institution can be set and transmitted to the decision-making process, which ultimately involves the Board of Trustees. And I think that that's something that we need to make sure works well. I'm in my early days here, so I haven't really had a lot of time to observe the way in which input from different constituencies, because obviously at NYU we have a lot of constituencies. Students are incredibly important in those groups, but faculty and staff and alumni, and residents, people who live around the Greenwich Village and beyond. So there are lots of constituencies, but making sure that the student voice is heard is something that I will hope to work with you to ensure.
And you can be sure that the Affordability Steering Committee would look forward to working with the SSC Affordability Committee. And there are students, of course, on the Affordability Task Force. So we promised Michael that there would be time for the Q&A directly. And so please join me in thanking this extraordinary group of students for this conversation. I'm going to turn this back over to Michael, and I think we're all leaving, and leaving Andy up here.
I'm being abandoned.
Yeah. It's okay, I'm coming to join you. I guess I'll sit over here, so I'm not all the way up at the edge. Hello, everyone. So thank you all to our excellent panelists for that great conversation. I'm now going to take over the role as moderator as we kind of go between questions that were submitted online. So those questions include ones from students in Abu Dhabi, Shanghai, around the world who weren't able to be here, but then also provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions who are here. So there's a microphone in the back, and there's one up here. So if you would like to ask a question, we'll just alternate between online and in person. So just raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can come up to the mic. We're gonna start with a question online. And I'm gonna read them directly just so that I don't misconstrue them at all. So at the reception that you hosted earlier this semester at Tandon, you spoke about the part played by the Brooklyn campus as part of the NYU. Now that you have had some more time to understand NYU more closely, what steps do you plan to take to make NYU Tandon more closely integrated with the rest of the university, keeping in mind the role that technology plays and the close link between engineering and basically everything from arts to governance? Events like the Hack NYU, for instance, were really great opportunities for such collaborations.
That's an important question. it's also, I think, important for all of us to remember. We talked about the GNU, and that was an important set of developments over the last couple of decades. But arguably the single most significant academic development at NYU, certainly in the last decade, was the return of engineering. Remember, this was a university that had no engineering for 50, 60 years. And the idea that a leading university would go into the 21st century without technology, without engineering is unthinkable. So for me, that was a very important step. The Brooklyn Polytechnic, now renamed the Tandon School of Engineering, that was a very important step. And I think it does two things. So first, absolutely, the questioner is right. Technology plays a role in so many different parts of life. And suddenly we begin to see an absolute blossoming of collaborations and new programs, research collaborations. Yesterday, I was at the launch of a new program called the Center for Cybersecurity, which was at Tandon in Brooklyn, which was a collaboration between Tandon and the law school. I know well that a new program is being developed by nursing and Tandon. Why? Because nurses in contemporary clinical settings are constantly being exposed to high technology. And I could list many others. And so for me, the arrival of Tandon is a really important step, and it allows NYU to do new things that are extremely relevant for the 21st century. I'll finish with one other one. I could list many others. The collaboration between Tandon and Tisch in what's called Magnet, which is media and game network. So this is teaching and developing gaming technology. And now that links us to something that is also very powerful in Brooklyn, and I hope there's a major building. It's called 370 J Street. And that building, it came to NYU from the city of New York, and that will be a focal point for many of these sort of cutting edge, high technology, Tandon, yes, but intersection with other schools. And it will include not only academic space, not only research space, but also incubator space. And again, in the 21st century, a university located in the city of New York, we have a role to play in helping our students and our faculty develop their ideas. And that development may be purely in academic publications, but also maybe in starting companies. And we all know where Google came from. It came from Stanford's engineering department. And so, that kind of opportunity that bringing students, bringing academics, but also the space and the expertise to help them develop their ideas is very important, and will allow Tandon and NYU to play an important role in economic development in Brooklyn and New York more broadly.
Thank you. Up in the back.
Good afternoon.
It's one.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good to see one.
Yeah, you too. So an important point you made is that obviously NYU has been a global university for quite some time. Likewise, however, the questions of affordability and NYU have been present at the university for a while. In fact, the first list of demands that a student made back in 1965 included lowering tuition costs and freezing tuition increase. So this is nothing new. I'm just wondering, my first question is, I'm just wondering what exactly, like how aggressive you personally want to touch the issue. And then my second question is, this is a bit darker. There are students at NYU that are currently homeless. There are students at NYU that are living in boats, taking baths at the fitness center, and going to class. There are students at NYU that are engaging in sex work and also illegal means of getting money to pay for tuition. I think we're letting these students fall through the crack, and NYU really does need to touch this issue and aggressively. Like, we can't have NYU students doing sex work and doing other illegal activities so that they can stay at this university.
Yeah, well, let me respond. Obviously, I've only been here 2 months, so I wasn't here in 1965, so I can only respond in the time that I've been here. And use that time to signal what I hope I have done, that this is an issue of major importance for me. I hope I was aggressive in the first weeks of coming here in getting groups of faculty leadership together and getting them to agree with me that affordability, it didn't take any effort at all because everyone recognizes this is a key issue. We were able to make those steps in freezing room and board and in reducing the rate at which tuition increases. There are inevitable challenges for NYU, and Amanda, touched upon it absolutely right on the mark. We don't have Yale's endowment. We are a tuition-dependent institution. The education we provide is paid for principally by tuition. And so it does not give us the kind of flexibility that you might imagine we would have. Can we halve tuition? Only by doubling the size of classes and halving the size of the faculty. And no one would want that. We must maintain the quality of our education. That being said, we've got to be very attentive to the second issue you raised, students who are suffering as a result of these financial pressures. Obviously, we can't talk about individual cases, but I would hope that the student support structures within the university are there to respond and to try to alleviate the issues that those students are facing. Inevitably, we have limitations just simply because of the nature of the university that we are. I wish we had, I've often said, we have 25,000 undergraduates, and again, I don't want to minimize the graduate issue as well. We have 25,000 undergraduates. Princeton has 5,000. If we wanted Princeton's financial aid package, we would need not only Princeton's endowment, we'd need 5 times Princeton's endowment, which is about $120 billion dollars. Currently, our endowment is 3.5. So, that is a very long road to haul ourselves up. We are pursuing it because we must, and increasing financial aid is an incredibly high priority. And we have very dedicated staff at NYU who try very hard to target that financial aid to where it is needed. When there are cases where that's not being achieved, then we need to know about it to assess them and to try to help.
Thank you. We're going to go back to an online question. I am an international student with some financial troubles. I am not qualified for financial aid, but I have very decent grades. Have you or will you plan to offer more merit-based scholarships for international students?
Obviously, I can't respond to individual requests in a setting like this, but one of the was this a graduate student or an undergraduate? It's hard to say. At the undergraduate level, we've focused very much on need. It's important that our resources, in a sense, to follow Juan's question, our resources go to those who need it. Merit-based inevitably leads to resources going where they are less needed. And so it's a principal philosophy within financial aid in all leading universities in the US that they be focused on need rather than merit. And so there is no plan to change that.
Thank you. You had your hand up for a while. If you want to go up to the mic and introduce yourself.
Great hat.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luis Garcia. I serve as the president for the Veterans Association out of the NYU SPS. I come here today not only to listen to the lecture and hear what the school is doing. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. two things are, I guess, of my concern. One that was raised here earlier with the discussion on, I guess, mitigating or making more affordable NYU, say, tuition, or, doing whatever may be possible to, get more people in and, keep, like, say, what was touched upon was the freezing of costs associated with people who dorm in NYU. And I mean, I, as a New Yorker, I was born and raised in the Bronx, and I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And the school, it's in itself is still very expensive for me to go to. And we have very little allocation for the Yellow Ribbon program, which is a federal funding program that if the school matches, whatever the school will match the VA, the Veterans Affairs Bureau, then the Veterans Affairs Bureau will also give that in hand. So I wanted to know if you would support veterans coming to the school who are also having a lot of difficulties in making ends meet and just attending the school and having the school be as not only competitive, of course, academically and from reputation's sake, but on account case of affordability, and then also how if it plays out with the freezing of assets or freezing, of costs for those who dorm here. Normally, it's the case that the majority of people living in New York City, like myself, who without the military would never even dreamed of being able to come here. I would never afforded it ever, or anything close to this. Especially living in New York City, if I wasn't living in my parents' place and literally still not having the means to pay for tuition and whatnot. So I believe, or I'm under the impression that the people who come here who from abroad have the means to pay to be in New York City, especially if they're going to live in the middle of Manhattan. It's kind of, I guess, not sensitive to others, in particular to how NYU is New York University. I mean, it's crazy expensive for New Yorkers as well. So if you could keep us in mind, and I guess if you could see where you would be going, what direction you would take for veterans in the school across all the other institutions.
Let me say I heartily endorse and acknowledge what you said, and obviously enormously support the continued involvement of veterans and attendance of veterans at NYU. I will say in these first 2 months, this isn't an issue that I've got deeply involved in, but your words have clearly sent me the message that I need to. The issue around funding, the issue around the Yellow Ribbon program, and whether the funds that are available for that are sufficient is something that I will look at, taking away the words that you said. Of course, New York University is New York University, and we are very proud, and we should be very proud to have been in this city for 185 years and to have contributed to this city and have educated generations upon generations of New Yorkers. But it's also the case that we are now an international university, and we rightly have students from all over the world. In the way that New York itself, I'm an immigrant. I've come from across the ocean, and so New York is filled with multi-generations of immigrants, and that's how it thrives and that's how it defines itself. So I find being in New York, being of New York, but also being open to residents of New York as well as the world is something that NYU is and should be.
Thank you very much. And if I could leave with one more thing that came up to mind is that considering that the schools are all linked together within the NYU, I guess, umbrella, I find that it's very difficult, however, it was touched upon earlier, taking a course at another school, the caps on what's applicable and what's not applicable to someone's curriculum is really, it's very difficult because, say, I'm doing the ISM, the Information Systems Management Program out of SPS, and I want to do a minor in cybersecurity at Tandon. However, it's not actually, I had talked to the deans over there, and they said that it would be okay for me to attend, but it's not guaranteed that I would rate the minor after taking the courses. So things of that nature, it's as if you could take a class that has the exact same description, but it does not suffice if it's not taken at school, and it's kind of like almost cannibalism amongst the schools to like see whatever they can get for the students, and it kind of like defeats the purpose of having a linked school, I think.
Yeah. No, I do, and that really connects back to one of the earlier questions about cross-school interaction, cross-school collaboration. Those are academic questions. They need to be addressed with your people at the school, the dean and the dean's director of graduate studies and director of undergraduate studies alike. But they should be raised, and questions about applicability to minors will have to go through an approval process that can only be taken on by the school. But it's an issue that I will raise from my direction. We do meet monthly with what we call the senior leadership team, the deans and directors. And the first meeting we had in January, the sole topic for discussion was how we can get the flow of students between schools working more effectively. And really, it's the issue you've just raised.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking about
It's a very nice hat. The next question coming in online is, this afternoon tea is happening during International Women's Day. Can you address the issue of fees and other unfair expenses that PhD students in Steinhardt, with a high percentage of female students, have to pay, and the inequality when compared to with schools with higher male percentage of student body, like GSAS, and much less expensive matriculation fees they pay after courses are finished?
Yeah, that's a very detailed question about the financial issues of a single school. There is an implication that it is gender linked. I understand that there may be different gender ratios in different schools, but I can assure the questioner that the differences in fees, and of course I fully recognize that there are differences in fees among the schools as the nature of degree programs differs among the schools, but those are purely based on degree costs and have absolutely no link to the gender ratio of the school. But I can't comment in any specific on the specific any specificity on the specific fees that the question is referring to.
Okay, thank you. You've had your hand up for quite a while.
Hi there. So my name is Hannah. I'm a working class student here, an indebted student here. I'm also a student worker. And I think that those identities are intrinsically linked, because a lot of times if you get a work study package in your financial aid package, it often means that it's coming with loans, because those are both indicators that you simply can't afford to be at this university otherwise. As therefore we see, or the group that I'm with, the NYU Student Labor Action Movement, and I think student workers at large see a living wage of $15 as a minimum wage as essential to affordability on this campus, because student workers are often the most vulnerable students here. They're often the people that Juan was referring to who have to resort to other means, other jobs that may or may not be legal in order to make their way here. And we see 15 as a way maybe out for those students. But we've been hearing this narrative that among other things aren't affordable for the university. Another narrative that we've seen is where our endowment's going. Although it is much smaller than schools like Yale, Princeton, Harvard, we also see that the national average for investment in hedge funds is around 19%. And NYU's, if we've done our calculations correctly, is around 40% of our investment in hedge funds. We know that hedge funds have been proven to be a sort of bad investment on the market since 2002, that they've had their worst year on record in 2014. But we know also that 27 of our board members are financiers, and a number of those financiers are hedge fund managers. And so when we talk about it's not money, it's choices, it's priorities. I wonder about if we are prioritizing students who are having issues of affordability, specifically student workers on this campus, or if we're prioritizing the needs of the people on our board, on our administration, and so forth.
Can I separate those two issues because they really are unrelated? NYU has an endowment of 3.5. I'll do the second one first. 3.5 billion. That every year at a 4% spend rate, which is what every university endowment is in the region of 4 to 4.5, because endowments are there for the long term. That gives us about $120 million a year coming from the endowment income. NYU last year spent $300 million on financial aid. So there is a commitment to supporting low-income students that far exceeds the funding coming from the endowment. So in terms of the way in which this university apportions its available funds, that is a clear statement of commitment and priority, and that will continue. In terms of the way in which the endowment is managed in a professional way. It is managed by a rigorous investment committee that oversees the chief investment officer. This is a model that follows many other university endowments and is indeed focused on preserving the capital, the value of the endowment over the long term. NYU is a 185-year-old university, and so the endowment needs to be there 185 years from now. And so this is something that the Chief Investment Officer and also the overseeing investment committee take great concern over. Your first question, remind me, you've now, just quickly.
Yeah, sure. So it's about a $15 minimum
The 15,
wage.
thank you. I came from the UK. I was at Oxford for the last 6.5 years. The living wage was a big issue in the UK, and I was very pleased to be the Vice-Chancellor there when the university committed to the living wage for all of its employees, and indeed all of its contract employees. I am well aware of the statewide debate around the living wage. Governor Cuomo is making a strong statement. I'm also aware that the conversations and considerations of the budget implications of living wage for student workers, or rather the $15 wage for student workers, that is under consideration at the present time in this budget cycle. Now, of course, you are also correct in stating that, of course, work-study programs and the funding of student workers through those work-study programs are a form of financial aid. And so inevitably, that would be a question that, as we consider the cost of raising the student minimum wage, that would then take money from financial aid that could be used more effectively, or perhaps could be moved more effectively in other sources. So it's a financial question. It's also a financial aid question of where we feel we're in consultation with students, and that has to be part of this process, where we feel the most effective targeting of financial aid for the students most in need is made. But I think this is something I have been made well aware of, even in these 2 months that I've been here, and it is under consideration at the moment.
Great. I'll just end quickly by formally inviting everyone here, but specifically you, President Hamilton, to the Student Worker Wage Board occurring on April 1st here. So a place in which members of the NYU community and administration can hear directly from student workers about their concerns, hosted by NYU Sen. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much. A question online coming in. While many students enrolled in NYU's online-only degree programs appreciate the flexible nature of the program, not having classes on campus can be alienating. Is anything being done to ensure that online students are included in the NYU community and that NYU resources are fully available to them?
That's a very interesting question. It speaks to an inevitable development that all universities are exploring and indeed experimenting with, and the extent to which online classes should be expanded, the extent to which they are working, the extent to which they should become part of the future of the university. I think the questioner raises an interesting question. You know, obviously online courses kind of by definition can be taken at a distance, and when there is a distance, how does one manage community? Obviously social networking is a way of forming a community online. I just spent the last, as I said, the last 6.5 years in Oxford, and we used to imagine, Oxford has a lot of colleges, which of course are bricks and mortar, and we used to imagine what a virtual college would look like. You know, could you have a 39th virtual college of Oxford that would have the community formed online with the same kind of interactions and tutorials and professors talking with their students, where social network would be the glue that holds people together? It would be hard to have too many meals together, but on the other hand, there will always be some limitations. But in many ways, those are questions I throw out to you. You know, for our online students, what can we do to help include them in the life of the university, help them feel less distant and alienated from the university? And I'd be very interested to hear ideas from our questioner and others.
Does anyone have ideas on that?
Okay. I love the Arsenal shirt. I came 3,000 miles to get away from Arsenal shirts. And now I see one on the second to back row.
You can never get away. In the gray sweater, did you have a question?
Please.
A new question. Yeah, I don't think anyone here is going to talk about online courses.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is TJ. I'm a junior at Steinhardt. I'm also a student veteran. So I let my Marine go first. I'm proudly served in the United States Navy. To piggyback off of, I guess, the student veterans' concerns is we have gone every, I guess, avenue from speaking to student government to certain NYU officials, to even a copy of drafting letters to every dean of the NYU schools of why certain schools and certain, I guess, programs on an undergraduate or graduate level, funding for this Young Ribbon program is allocated differently. And, you know, I recently, this past Thursday, sat down with several other leaders, student veteran leaders, on why those funds are specifically allocated that way, even with those specific run student veteran organizations, and why, I guess essentially, like, why as veterans do we need to compete against one another to have funding put forth to pay for our tuition? You know, it's obvious that we are not traditional, the traditional college student. There's a limited amount of funding in regards to scholarships and grants that other college students can take advantage of. There has been, I guess, another main issue, and I hate to, you know, bring it up again, you know, I don't want to sound like we're attacking you on this, but I think the voices of the student veteran community are feeling like, why is, you know, the school who's recently launching campaigns for diversity and having these workshops, like, why is it a decentralized university when it comes to student veterans? There is 5 specific certifying officers for 5 schools at NYU, and everyone else has to deal with 1 certifying official who refuses to speak to students in their office, return emails or phone calls, and these benefits are being either postponed or certified at a later time frame. Now, with the post 9/11 GI Bill, it's a federal run program that offers per academic year NYU a total of $21,000 in tuition, but it also cuts funding directly to us student veterans, a living stipend. Now, I myself am also a resident of New York. If this certifying official is not putting in benefits in a timely manner, how am I going to pay my rent, pay my MetroCard to come to school? I mean, I know you're very new to this position, and it strikes me a little bit odd that, like I said, we have gone to every avenue to speak to administrators, and we haven't heard any like open dialogues or a plan for resolution. So, I mean, I have all the documentation that we have been putting in since this past fall. So, I guess my main question to you is, what are we to expect, or like what can we see from you to like actually lead towards a plan for resolution?
Well, can I say I'm very glad you have both raised this issue. This is the first time that it's been raised to me. So I of course am aware of student veterans, and I'm very pleased that NYU has among its student body a significant number of student veterans. I wasn't at all aware of the issues you've just raised. So in my first 2 months, I'm very glad that you've taken this opportunity to raise them. And let me say, I will promise to look into them. I hope you'll give me a copy. I'm sure it's for me, and I would like that.
I can speak to you after.
Well, I would like that because I need to familiarize myself with the issues that you're raising. It's hard to get a handle exactly. NYU is a big, decentralized place, and it's kind of a consequence of being 50,000 students and many thousands of staff and faculty. And we are divided into different schools, and those schools do have different policies. Each one, is many of them are the size of small universities, if you think of Steinhardt and Tisch and Stern. So it's not surprising that there is some devolution and divergence of approach. But our job, certainly in the central administration, is to try and minimize that. And when it comes to the student experience, and particularly the veteran experience, we clearly haven't been doing enough. And so I'm pleased you've raised it. I promise I will look into this issue. But as I said, it's the first time that it's been raised to me at all, and I'm glad that you've brought lots of detail to the issue.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, TJ. And I think we have about time for one more in-person question and then one more online question. So do you want to go in the green?
Hi, Mr. President. My name is Tessa. I'm a senior in CAS, and I'm also a representative of NYU Divest, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a campaign on campus to encourage the university to pull its investments, specifically its endowment, out of the fossil fuel industry. I'll keep it brief because I know we're limited in time, but given the wide campus support for NYU divestment, the pressing issues that come with climate change, the overwhelming evidence that investments in fossil fuels are risky economically, as well as 24 years of stakeholder engagement that have failed to see real progress. I wanted to ask you 2 questions, if you don't mind. First, we've invited you to come meet with us, and we'd love to hear back from you. And second, if you would be interested in publicly supporting divestment.
Let me respond to the first question first, which is I'd be delighted to meet with you. You sent an email earlier this week, and I will respond in the next few days. I'm also aware that this is an issue that has come just at the last board meeting for the first time in front of the Board of Trustees, and I know a number of members of the student group met with a subsection of the Board of Trustees. This is an issue that the Board of Trustees will come back to and will consider at its next meeting. For me, it's a complex issue. I will look back to my time at Oxford, where you will no doubt be aware of the discussions that took place while I was Vice-Chancellor of Oxford, and the consideration that certainly was made during that time by a committee involving students, involving the Divest group in Oxford, involving faculty, many of whom were part of the people who laid out some of the economic foundations of the stranded assets question. And the recommendation from that committee was that, in fact, Oxford, and here obviously I can only talk about Oxford because I've been here such a short time, but we should not divest from the top 200 fossil fuel companies. We should certainly be very attentive to concern and to the consequence of very polluting forms of coal, particularly thermal coal and oil sands. As it happened, there was no investment, a direct investment in coal or in oil sands, and so there was no divestment to be made. But the decision of that committee, the recommendation, I should say, of that committee to the board was that, in fact, issues of carbon dioxide emissions, issues of climate change are best pursued by engagement, are best pursued by collaboration. And so the recommendation of that committee, which was what was followed during my time at Oxford, was that we continue to engage with those top 200 companies. Obviously, I cannot speak for NYU and its board at this point. It is they who will be considering this issue and making the decision, but I can just tell you what my experiences were at Oxford. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. And then the final question, I think, is a nice way to wrap everything up, is how do you think we, the students, can help you and NYU succeed?
I think you have been doing a good job already over the past several years. Some of you may have heard me speak in other settings, and I think that the reason I'm here, quite frankly, the reason I came and took this role was because I saw an institution that was incredibly exciting, that had really traveled a great distance in a very short time, and it was quite remarkable what NYU has done in its academic programs in New York. I mentioned engineering, I mentioned the growing strength in medicine, let alone all of the schools and around Washington Square. So I'm here because this is an exciting place to be, and I know the students have very much played a role in that progress. And so I would just say to your question, Michael, I hope that we can continue a free flow of discussion and engagement. We need to hear from you. We need to hear what's working. We need to hear what's not working. You know, there will always be challenges because a university isn't really working hard enough if it has spare pockets of money floating around that can simply be given to a new priority. NYU, like Oxford and Yale, where I was before, are always on the edge of I won't quite say bankruptcy, on the edge of running out of money. Why? Because we have so many exciting, new, important initiatives, and any decision we make to invest in one means that we can't invest in another. Any decision we make that has an effect on our income will mean that it limits what we can do in other spheres. So I do think that having an open dialogue, having an opportunity to hear your views, and I see you frequently, but having the chance to exchange thoughts and ideas as we've done this afternoon will be important, and I look forward to doing it again in the future.
Great, thank you. And along that vein, we have another afternoon tea on March 31st, so there will be more information about that shortly. But I just want to say these are amazing times for us all to come together and speak directly with President Hamilton. I wanted to thank you for coming in after just 2 months of being and just thank all of you for coming and participating in our dialogue. So with that, hopefully we'll see many of you at the end of March. Have a great day. And I'm sure there's more food, so please.
That's different. We have a common interest, shared goal. But wow.